I got shot down one day. I recall scrambling around. We're getting shot at, and they're lobbing rocket-propelled grenades on us, and it's pretty messy. Here comes a medevac, and he comes in from the other direction. And he sits there, and he just comes in, and he hovers 12 inches off the ground. We grab bodies, and we're throwing bodies on board. No one's perfect. There isn't a guy out there that I know of. I know a lot of guys who are wealthy, and many of them have gone through trials and tribulations. It's just part of our nature.
What causes people to repeat, almost like they do it in a chain reaction, one bad decision after another, and they just don't learn?
So I learned not to be so cocky and self-reliant and just think I'm going to make it happen, because that's really what I was thinking. That's the way I was. My mentality was that.
In our lives, there's the big decisions and then there's small decisions, and all of these decisions, they impact our life, where we go, how we live, what happens next, right? And I kind of want to start this conversation with you, Jim. Like, can you remember a pivotal decision that you made in your life? What was it, and how did it shape your path?
Having been raised in the church, I received Christ as my Savior when I was 14. And so that's kind of the foundation from my youth all the way up. But I'd say I've thought about this. There's probably a half a dozen real critical decisions. But one that, it sounds funny, but the one that really changed my life was going into the Army. But going to my youth pastor at the time and counseling with him about that, because the Vietnam War was going on. And I'm thinking, that I had an opportunity to go in to Army flight school and become a helicopter pilot. And so, but I went to my youth pastor and I just sat down with him and talked about the whole thing. And being the wise man that he was, said, just go through the doors, because there were multiple doors to go through to get into this program. He said, just go through the doors. And he says, as God wants you, if he wants you in there, he's going to keep opening the doors. So I did that, and all the doors were open, and I joined. And I went in and changed my life. I was a going nowhere 19-year-old at the time. Your average C student, not really achieving much. I didn't have really any specific goals. And I joined the Army and went through flight school, became an Army officer and an Army helicopter pilot, and went to Vietnam. And it just changed my life. I turned from being a 19-year-old boy to being a 21-year-old man when I got out, and having gone through a lot. And it was just a major life-changing experience for me. But not just because I went in the Army, but I realized that I was capable of a lot more than I was giving myself credit for. But during that process, I was in Vietnam for a year. I got shot down one day. I recall scrambling around. We're getting shot at, and they're lobbing rocket-propelled grenades on us, and it's pretty messy. And I crawled. My crew, they didn't even know we were shot down at the time. I yelled, "We're taking fire! We're shot down!" And I dive over the back of the console, the back of the seat, and out the back side of the helicopter, and I crawl into the helicopter and get in a in a bomb crater. And I remember we were getting hit pretty hard at the time, and we were getting RPGs on us and stuff. And I crawled out of there, and I crawled around the back of the helicopter into a foxhole. And I remember in that foxhole, my mother had lost her brother in World War II. I had that in my mind. I just prayed at that point. I just said, God, please get me out of here. I can't afford to have my mother deal with another death in the family. And so, it wasn't 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes later, and gunships had come in and were doing their job and cleaning up things and suppressing the enemy. But then here comes a medevac, and he comes in from the other direction. And he sits there, and he just comes in, and he hovers 12 inches off the ground. And we grab bodies and we're throwing bodies on board. And I lost my crew chief in that. And my co-pilot and my gunner were both wounded pretty bad. I was wounded, but I was fine. And anyway, but the whole point of that whole thing is that I made a commitment to the Lord at that point that please get me out of here safely so that my mother doesn't have to be, go through this. And I said, I'll serve you the rest of my life. At that point, that was a commitment I made. Please get me out of here. I'll serve you the rest of my life. And I did. I got out of there, and I spent another probably 5 more months in Vietnam. But anyway, that's kind of a critical position, a critical situation that I remember that I went through. There's other times in my life that decisions, boy, there are just so many of them. It's hard to pin them all down.
But you had, let's see, it kind of sounds like you had a already solid grounding, so that when you were in this situation, you knew to turn to God and say that.
I did.
I'm thinking about, like, there's a lot of young people who go into the military, go into service, right? But they come back, and it doesn't have the same kind of effect on everyone.
Well, military today is a totally different military. And I'm not putting it down. It's wonderful. The guys that serve today are just amazing. It's a volunteer military, Most of the people we dealt with, I volunteered, but most of the people we dealt with and worked with were drafted, and they didn't want to be there. They were a lot of my buddies in flight school. They didn't want to be there. They were there because they got drafted. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know how to compare the two anymore. But I think just the main things for me I take out of it. I mean, I think of that situation. I think of my time in the military literally every day. I mean, it's not something I just take casually. I have things in that situation, in that year that I was there and throughout flight school and everything, that are part of my life. And several of my good buddies today are guys I served with, and we have shared experiences. So, it's I'm kind of in a brotherhood. It's like a brotherhood. You got your buddies you serve with. It's a brotherhood.
So every day, you said you think about it every day.
Every day, every
Wow.
day. I don't think there's a day that goes by where I don't ponder that situation I just explained to you about. That comes to mind constantly, because I always figure to myself, I'm the aircraft commander and I'm supposed to protect my crew, and always the thought of, well, what if I came in a different way? What if I, what I mean? If I approached the way the medevac came in, but I keep going over in my brain. If I came in the way the medevac came in, I'd have been shot straight on, because that's where the bullets were coming from. So it was a blessing that I did come around the other way. But so I think about that all the time. God has had his hand on me for a long, long time, and protected me. I had a situation in Vietnam where my roommate at the time was a captain, and he was the maintenance officer, and we were best friends. And he told me, he says, Jim, let me go out with you today. He says, I want some action. I'm tired of this maintenance stuff, right? Test flying things and all that. I want some action. I want to go. So we were inserting some troops that day, and I said, fine, come on out. I let my co-pilot go for the day, and I had him in as my right seat. And we went and picked up the first troops and dropped them off on a ridge. And I do the first, what we call a sortie. I do the first sortie, and then I give it to him, and he goes and does the second one. And so he went down, picked up the second one, and dropped as we were coming in on the ridge, and we were just coming up to the ridge. By the grace of God, and I mean, no other way of describing it, if this had happened 15 seconds sooner, I would have not survived. But the entire rotor system on that helicopter blew off. The transmission broke off and went flying, and we crashed straight down on the ground. But had it happened 15 seconds before that, I would have rolled down that cliff. And that's just the kind of things that happen. It's just God's providence. He says, nope, not today. You're not going today. I got more planned for you. So it's that kind of stuff. And I've had a number of things like that happen in my life where it's just been God's providence in my life, just protecting me, and I'm blessed by that.
That's amazing. But what if we turn the page and start and maybe talk a little bit about some of the decisions that maybe were not so great? Something, because right now, more and more people relate when they hear stories, relate to those who are open enough and vulnerable enough to share some of the bad decisions they made and how those decisions had and maybe a negative impact in their life. When I was thinking about this conversation, I read the Bible a few times, and certain people from the Bible came to my mind. I'm thinking about the first one is King Saul, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that story.
I know
there was
about
a
it.
war going on, and he was on the mountain,
Mm-hmm.
and he was supposed to make a sacrifice. And the prophet Samuel told him before then, do not do it until I come there, right? And he's looking out and he's watching what's happening, and they're getting really beat up by this other army. And he's afraid that this army is about to just conquer, and he loses
He just takes
patience.
off and does it himself.
He just does it himself. And that decision that he made, and everything kind of went downhill for him after that. And then same thing with King David, right? I mean, everything is good. He decides.
A little different, though, scenario with King David. King David was looking at a woman. He was going to commit adultery. That was a different ballgame. But Saul, I agree that the story with Saul, honestly, is that he was doing it in his own power. He just felt he was capable and he was going to go out and do it. He didn't really need God in his life to go conquer this group.
But what causes people to repeat, almost like they do it in a chain reaction, one bad decision after another, and they just don't learn? Sometimes people are capable of, even when they make a bad decision, they analyze, okay, something went wrong. What was I thinking? How do I approach this situation? And then they course correct. And then there are others who just continue repeating and just going down into this downward spiral.
It could be caused by many things. It could be caused by repeated sin in your life. It could be caused by just not listening to somebody I had a situation, and I regret this situation, but I eventually came home, and I went to Australia and worked for a year, and then I went to New Zealand and worked for a year, came back, met a woman, and I married her. And we were married for 3 years, and I was starting to piddle around with real estate at the time. I had an opportunity to buy a hotel motel in Clear Lake. Man. And my in-laws lived next door to it.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, and I was all hot on it. I was going to, conquer the world, and so full of myself at the time. And I thought, I'm going to do this. And I had a couple partners as well. And so anyway, my wife says, I don't feel comfortable about this. And I said, don't worry, it's going to work out. I'm doing this, right? Well, God was telling me not to do it through her because she was right. It was a bad decision. And we ended up losing everything that we were investing in that. It took 7 years of pain and agony to overcome that and to get out of that situation. Mm-hmm. So I learned not to be so cocky and, self-reliant and just think I'm going to make it happen, because that's really what I was thinking. That's the way I was. My mentality was that I was in my early 30s, and I just felt like I can conquer the world and I'm going to make this happen. We're going to make $1 million and all, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You've been there. Come on.
Oh
So
yeah.
anyway, so I ended up losing all the money, and we ended up, it was difficult with my wife and her family because they lived next door and they ran the place for us. So it was very difficult. Anyway, but it was a poor decision. And it was a poor decision because I didn't listen to my wife at the time. She had better intuition and better knowledge about it than I did in terms of just the whole family dynamic and all that stuff. But
Well, if you would be right now during that situation making that decision, how would you know that your wife's advice is the right advice to listen to?
well, first I would go back and look at the actual investment again and analyze it closer, which I didn't do. And my wife, she looked at it from the family dynamic and from, we didn't live in that town. We lived in Santa Rosa, and the hotel is up in Lakeport.
Mm-hmm.
And so she just had a better intuition of the thing than I did. And I was just foolish. I should have not done that. I should not have done that situation. I would have gotten into real estate way before I did, had I listened and done the right thing. But I didn't, because I was full of myself. I just was so determined that I was going to make it. And but that's kind of like Saul. He was going to go out and conquer the army because he could do it. He was, Saul.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I was. And not a good way to be.
Well, it's, I think we're constantly being sort of pushed down. Our human nature is such that there's ego, there's pride, right?
Oh,
And
two major problems. Ego and pride. Pride is the cardinal sin, right?
yeah.
And ego goes right along with it. So,
Well, it's the way I see it is our life is, if we want to make the right decisions, if we want to improve, if we want to live in kind of in tune with our values, right? Like it's constant battle with our flesh, with what kind of our the human nature, what our body wants to do. It's like Apostle Paul writes in his letters to I forgot which exactly the book in the Bible, but he writes the fact that like the body is like I don't find strength to do what I know is right, but the body always wants to do things that is not good.
Romans.
Yes, Romans.
The latter part of Romans, he's talking about that. He doesn't want to do something, but he does it anyway, kind of. Well, it's funny because later on in our life, a couple of years, or a year or so later, I think it was still a little bit later. I don't remember exactly, but we were living at a house. I had a house in Redwood City, and we had come across a situation that we wanted to move to Santa Rosa. And so we put our house up for sale, and golly, it went first couple of days it sold. It was in contract. And we had bought, I was going to buy a laundromat up in Santa Rosa as a supplemental income.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the insurance business at the time. I came home and I got in the insurance business. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll make it. I'll go up there and we'll get in the business and all that. And I remember my office that I was working out of was in Daly City. And I remember I just went on my way. I just was feeling uneasy. And I just prayed. I said, God, if this is not for me, if this is not for us to do right now, then you need to stop this and cancel everything. And that day, our real estate investment, I just gave it up. I said, I don't want part of it. I'm ready to not do it. That day, our contract on the house fell through. The whole issue of buying the laundromat fell through. I mean, all the things that I had done and had planned fell through that day
Wow.
and it was just giving it up and not saying I can do this on my own. So it's kind of a lesson. It was a lesson of not trying to do it on my own.
Yeah. Well, when we approach certain situations and we have to make a decision, there's the emotional side and then there's the logical side. How would you how do you make understand the difference, like which side is really pushing me to make this decision? Is it me being emotional in this, or is logic always the right way to make decisions?
Man, it's obviously one of the ways you should look at it. You should look at something objectively to make sure that it's affordable, that it's practical, that it fits into your plan of where you are in your life. I mean, that all makes sense. But I think praying over things is really important. And I always try to, whenever I buy something now, I just pray over it and say, if it's not for me, it's not that important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just got a house up in Elmore, and it was a couple of difficulties, but it wasn't at the time. During that process, I was saying, God, if this is not for us, if this house isn't for us, then take it. I don't care. It's not something that I need. We kind of want it, but it's certainly not a need. And it all worked out. It worked out beautifully. But I really believe that God wants us to depend on Him and wants us to turn things over to Him, allow Him to get involved in our decision making in our life. And I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, other than now, I mean, what I do for a living, and when I'm going to develop a project, I always take a good hard look at it. I lay it all out, design it, do all the I do all the calculations to make sure it's going to fit the objective that I'm trying to fit. And I do a 3-year budget. I mean, I do, a lot of preliminary work to make sure that I'm just not saying, oh yeah, it's going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I want to know that it's going to work out, because there's a lot at stake when things don't work out. I've been there too. And you don't want to be on that other side. You want to make sure it's going to work out. So,
there's a lot of online content out there, whether in YouTube or social media, where there's these influencers who talk about what it takes to be successful. And there's a lot of like younger guys, girls listening and taking that advice. And I've heard this advice where they say, you know what, sometimes you just got to burn the bridges and go all in, and maybe others around you are going to call you foolish and they're not going to agree with it, but that's sort of what it takes for you to make that leap.
Well, you have to decide if you're a risk taker. See, my wife's not a risk taker. I am a risk taker. So it's a battle back and forth of no risk taker versus risk taker. So you're always, being a risk taker myself, having to work with my wife who's not, I have to be able to defend my position enough to make it, to succeed in it. And sometimes we don't do it because of her opinion.
So in your current stage in life, would you say that a lot of the things that you work on right now, whether it's some sort of project or a business deal that you're going in and you're making a decision, do you typically now feel really confident with what you decide, or are you still sometimes faced with hesitation and uncertainty?
Once I've committed to a project, I'm pretty confident that I'm okay. But up to that point, I'm saying, am I making sure that I see it correctly? Am I making sure that I understand all the different aspects? Like, the project I'm doing right now, I have to make sure that it's going to generate the kind of income that it's going to need to generate to get the loan and to provide money for partners, things, all that stuff. It's just.
Is it a lot of like speculation, projections, or is this just you're looking at pure facts, and then those facts sort of determine what would be the outcome?
Well, now, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, so there isn't a lot I haven't seen. I've seen a lot, I've been through a lot. So it's not, to me now, it's like second nature. I can do it. I can develop and build what I'm building pretty easily, I think. But, at the very beginning, I have 25 years of experience and, knowledge now to go with me. So I'm hoping that I am smart enough to be able to see the pitfalls in things. But no one's perfect. There isn't a guy out there that I know of. I know a lot of guys who are wealthy, and many of them have gone through trials and tribulations. It's just part of our nature.
Yeah. Well, those are the things that really make us stronger.
Correct.
And they help us make better decisions in the future.
For me, I want to be more dependent upon God's influence in my life and His influence in my decision making. It's human nature to just want to do it without that consideration. But I really want to do God's will in my life, and I don't worship money. I don't really. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, wow, I'm going to get. I don't look at things that way. I look at it because I enjoy it. I enjoy developing. I enjoy that process. And so it's more of an enjoyment than it is anything else. Mm-hmm. And the byproduct of it is that if you're successful, it is lucrative. But it takes a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years.
Oh, yeah.
Years, not weeks, not months. It takes. I'll be into my project I'm doing right now 2 years, and I haven't broken ground yet. So what does that tell you?
Well,
it takes 2 years.
2 years. 2 years for us, like the younger people, that's a long time. But for someone like me who's just turned 40, 2 years is really
40. My daughter's visiting us right now. She's turning 40 in August. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, it's people, though, today we live in a society that is, got very short, I don't know.
Attention span, or they want quick results.
Instant wealth.
Instant, yes.
They want instant wealth. They want to be rich overnight. They want to get, and all these internet people, there's so much garbage out there. And most of these people honestly never made a real living.
Yeah.
They just got a microphone in front of their face, mm-hmm. and they think they know something, so they get on and they start preaching about what they think they know. But I mean, honestly, there's a lot of young people out there that really don't know very much.
Yeah, that's true.
And but they think they know a lot. And the platform, the YouTubes and the all these different
mm-hmm.
platforms. I don't know how they make it, but apparently they're making some pretty good money.
Oh yeah.
That.
I mean, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, there was no such word like influencer.
Yeah.
Or hey, how are you making your money? Well, yeah. I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah. I mean, really? You're a YouTuber? You're an who are you influencing? Who are you influencing? Do you have really? I see these guys, all these political guys too. A lot of political guys on, of all different persuasions, and they all think that everybody should listen to them. I don't know how they do it.
Well, it's all about the views, right? You get the views, and then you want the companies to advertise, and you promote products, and then you get this. Anyways, that's kind of how it is. Jim, here's a question: when you look at success, how do you measure success that goes beyond career achievements or financial gain?
I'm at peace where I am because of decisions I've made and things that have taken place. I've got 3 wonderful kids, and I'm comfortable in what God has done in my life. And so with that, I'm at peace. It's not something I make, or, you know what I mean? It's the peace of God in you. You know, if you have Him in your heart, the peace of God's in your heart, and He gives me peace. That's the only peace I have, frankly, in the world, because I think the world's going crazy right now.
Yeah.
And the only peace I have, literally the only peace I have about the future is that He's in charge.
You know, I just recently visited a business conference, and there was a lot of younger sort of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
right? And there's just so much ambition in these people. How would you recommend for younger people, especially the younger ones who have so much ambition, to channel that ambition so that it does not really get them focused on like the worldly things? Because here's the funny thing that I noticed. So when someone achieves big success, they say, hey, once I got here, let's say we're talking about money, right? They say, once I got here, it's not what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But other who haven't yet reached that success, they hear something like this and they still don't understand that.
Well, pursuit of money is the root of all evil. You know that. I mean, it's really, you can't. I don't think. I remember stupid things I used to say back when I was young. You know, God, if you just bless me here, then I'll go and do that, and all this stupid promises that never, happen, that you never do. Where the young people are today, there's so much get rich quick mentality out there, and entrepreneur seems to be the catchword for everybody nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
I had literally been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've started 20 companies in my life. So I am an entrepreneur. Okay, some successful, some not as successful. But the point is that, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I don't carry that word with a badge of honor or anything like that. It's more of just a makeup. Do you have the desire to pursue something? And my big problem is that I had gotten into financial planning, became a certified financial planner, and I did that for 20 years. And during that time, I had other businesses also.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like 5 businesses at one time. And I discovered that I'm really not very good at 5 at a time. I'm really good at 1, maybe 2, but 5, I'm not. I just not good.
It's just spreading too thin, right?
Yeah, way too thin. You can become mediocre at 5 or really good at 1 or 2. And I learned that lesson the hard way. I just had to basically drop some stuff and say, this is what I'm going to do. And that's all I'm going to do. And that ended up, financial planning got me into the real estate development business. I did other things, but got me into the real estate development business. And when I started doing storage, I fell in love with that. And I just focused strictly on that. And that's all I've done now for 25 years.
So you made that decision based on like what you like to do the most, or what was more profitable, or what was more interesting to you?
Well, I was in the financial planning business, and I had clients, and I had, I was doing very well. I was doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I had been selling to my clients secondary partnerships of public storage. So what we were doing is we were buying from people who own the partnership already. We were buying their interest at a discount and reselling it to my clients at a much better price and a much higher yield. And I learned a lot about the storage industry at the time, and I thought, I like this business. And I really kind of did that for a few years, thinking if there's never an opportunity for me to build one, I'm going to build one because I like this. It just makes sense. It's conservative. You can fall asleep with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you have to worry about every morning. Oh, am I going to get whatever? It's a very stable very good business. And so anyway, the opportunity finally came. I was also involved in a pay telephone company we raised a bunch of money and did pay telephones, and we became very large. And I sold my interest in that, and that was my seed capital to buy and get into the storage business. And golly, when I got in there, I really liked it. I thought this was really fun. I kind of lost interest in the financial planning part, and eventually closed my business down and just stuck with. After I had one built and I had a couple more in the mill building them, I thought I'm just going to do this, and I did it, and it turned out to be a good deal.
So you enjoy developing these
I love the creative part. I love to go look at a piece of land, kind of visualize what I can do there, how I can do it. Then I get the documents on it. I actually physically draw the plan of what I want to do. And then I do the financials on it to see if the financials all work. And if they work, then I take it to maybe a couple of possible partners, and say, this is what I'm doing. I tie the land up first, and then so nobody can take it out from under me. I just put it in escrow. And then I go and I put together a couple partners and say, would you be interested in this? And I show them the projections and the cash flow and all that over a 3-year period. And they either say yes or no, but I got more people who want to do it nowadays than I have projects. But, I'm 75 years old. I'm not looking to do 5 more projects. It's a lot of work.
It is.
And it's, today's world, it may be a little risky. Got to be really careful.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how I do it. And then once I get partners, then I'm full steam ahead. I do the rest of the due diligence on the property. I have to go do the entitlements, and that's always a bureaucratic mess.
Oh yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah, so you've developed stuff, and getting through entitlements is kind of like a big deal for me. Once I get entitled, then I've passed the point of one risk. Okay, then I can, once I get entitlements, then I can close escrow on the property.
Can you briefly explain entitlements to maybe those people who don't understand that term?
Well, you might buy a property that is not zoned for what you want to do with it. So you have to go and have it rezoned. Or you have to have a use permit for what you want to do. So you have to go and you have to present your plan. You have to get drawings to present what you're doing, and nowadays you have to present an architectural drawing, a civil engineering drawing, a landscape drawing, and you have to have a number of studies done to get through a what we call a design review approval. And once you get design review approval, at that point you're locked in. At that point, they give you the stamp of approval. You can take that project now and you can go forward with it. The risk of entitlement is gone.
And you usually do that while you're still in escrow. You don't close on the
property. You do it as much of that as you can when hopefully all of it before you close escrow. Like Colfax, the one we're doing right now, the seller of the property was getting a little antsy just because he had some other things he wanted to do. So we ended up closing escrow before, but I had a pretty good feeling everything was going to go through. The planner and I had developed a good relationship, and so I felt pretty solid that we were going to get approved, and we did get approved.
So that means that if something happens and you don't get approved, and then you have to cancel the purchase, the contract, you're losing some money because you've paid the engineer or the architect.
That's why you get them to do just what you need. I mean, I'm not getting working drawings. I'm getting, like the architectural will give me some elevations. We'll have a footprint and we'll go elevations and some colors. Okay, that's kind of what you take to design review for your design review approval. The civil engineer has to make sure that you have the proper water drainage, the proper lot lines identified, the easements, if there's any easements on the property, all that stuff. So you want to make sure that none of those things are going to be an obstacle in building the project out.
So, Jim, if someone's listening to this or watching this, and they are in front of a major decision in their life, they're trying to decide where to go as far as like career, or whether to open that business that they've always wanted to open. What are some of the things that you could recommend for them as far as like a process of making that decision?
Well, for me, the development business, I was very good friends with a guy who was a real estate developer, and he was like a mentor to me. And we did a office building together. Basically, he told me what to do. I did the work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the key is to find somebody who's doing what you want to do and shadow that person. Stick with them. Go out, learn what go out and learn what they're doing and be involved in their decision making if they'll give you that information, and really be knowledgeable have that person kind of as your mentor a little bit. I've found that to be the best way, because real estate development especially is just full of hazards. I mean, I had people come to me, they have a piece of property they want me to develop, and I told them, I said, I'll lay it out for you and show you, and I'll go to the city and I'll do the project for you if I can get it past planning. First thing I go down to the city and I talk to them, and they say, that's a floodplain. That's a floodplain. You can't build anything on that property. Now, the guys had already bought the property. They have $300,000 invested in this property they bought, and they can't build there because it's a floodplain. Now, see, I would not have done that. I would have gone down. I would have tied it up in escrow. I'd have gone down to the county or the city, and I would have laid out my plan. And I built a project in Windsor, and I'll bet you the planner in Windsor knew me because I probably took to her 6 projects over a 10-year period of projects where I wanted to buy a piece of land and build a storage facility. Every time it was like, oh no, we don't want that to be storage, So it was a battle to find, because they didn't want any more storage in their town, because they wanted to save it for industrial and retail and things. Anyway, I finally found a piece of property, and I laid it all out, and I took it to her, and she says, you got it. She says, you can get that one. So it was just a long battle of fighting, finding and finding and finding. During the recession, I probably found 6 or 7, probably 5 or 6 at least, properties that I wanted to develop after the recession. The problem is nobody had any money. It's just, you couldn't borrow money from your grandmother.
Yeah.
It was a tough time.
It was.
And I had some beautiful properties that I could have developed, but didn't, because I didn't have the money either. And so anyway, they didn't work out. But God in his providence gave me the one I did do in Windsor, and it turned out to be a very nice project, fortunately.
Yeah. Well, Jim, sounds like you've done a lot in your life, multiple businesses, multiple storage facilities. What would you say are some of your top accomplishments in life, or you would put at the top? They don't have to be business.
I think raising 3 great kids is probably one of being a participating dad. And, my daughter's visiting us right now, and we're pretty close. It's nice to have that wonderful relationship. But I don't know. Top accomplishments? I don't know. I mean, I have some business accomplishments, but I have some business failures too. It's I should say things that I wished had gone better than they did.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think staying with the Lord in my relationship, and I didn't for the first 20 years. I went to church like everybody else, and and did our group Bible study and all that stuff. But I never really grew. So eventually, I got a friend of mine convinced me to get into BSF, Bible Study Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through the 7 years of that. Actually, I went through an 8th year because it's a 7-year program, and I redid the first one over again. But anyway, to me, that was a huge accomplishment because it's an intense deal. It's 7 years of commitment that you have to go through. And what it did is it just opened my eyes up to what the Bible is and how everything about the Bible. I mean, I learned so much. My wife today says, "Well, you know so much about whatever," and I said, "Well, do BSF. Well, you'll learn a lot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's a great way to do it." But anyway, that kind of started me out in really pursuing God in a more intense way. And now today, I do a lot more. I mean, I study differently and
Mm-hmm.
a lot more. But I think that was a major decision to go into BSF, and so it was an accomplishment in my opinion. Finishing the 7 years, going through the whole, because it's a September through June. You go September through June. They take the summer off,
Mm-hmm.
and you just study, and you're with a group of guys, and you spend 7 years together.
So is there like someone at the leadership position?
There is a leader,
Mm-hmm.
and the group I was with, there was 125 guys, something like that, maybe 200 guys, But it was at a church, and the first you meet all together for a few minutes, and then you go into groups, and you go in a group of 10 to 15 guys. Excuse me, and then you go through. You have a strict curriculum. They're very strict about they give you the questions, they give you the stuff to study every week, and then you go into a group's discussion and you talk about all those things and what you've learned, and then you go back into the group again and you get a 45-minute lecture on that same stuff. So it's a couple hours, every Monday night, a couple hours. It's worth it.
Oh yeah.
It's worth the commitment because you just learn a lot. That structured learning.
Mm-hmm.
And
So I'm assuming it probably also helped you realize that right now we're living in a very interesting time.
we are.
Would you say that right now we're living in the end of days?
I think we are, but one of my best friends just spent 3 days with us, he and his wife, and he thinks a little different. He's a solid believer, great guy,
Mm-hmm.
love him to death, but he believes differently than I do. I accused him of being a preterist. He says, "Preterist? What's a preterist?" He looks it up. That night he looked it up. And he says, "I'm not a preterist, but maybe I'm a little bit of a preterist." I mean, there's a couple of different theologies. One is that we are in the tribulation already, and that all that. I just can't get into it. I really believe that the tribulation is coming, and that, even though I've studied this over and over back from different perspectives and everything, and the one that makes logical sense is that will be raptured, and we won't be a part of the tribulation. That the tribulation will be for the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just my point of view. I could be wrong, but my right or wrong in that doesn't affect my salvation.
Yes.
It's not like if you believe as a preterist and I believe as a premillennialist, we're both saved. It's not.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not going to determine our
Mhm.
salvation.
I agree with that.
It's
Yeah.
just we're just going one. It'll be one way or the other, and one of us who is right will be able to go to the other one and say,
Yeah.
"See, I was right."
Well,
But anyway,
the books like the Revelation and then the book of Daniel, right? There's a lot of writing about prophesying about what's going to be going on during the period where right before the Christ returning.
Yeah.
Do you see some things happening right now that are written about?
I'm very aware of I'm very cautious about everything that's going on right now.
What do you think about AI?
Well, AI, golly, I, I have some real reservations about AI. I think AI could be a real tool of the Antichrist. I think it could be a real tool because, I mean, it can. I was watching something today. It can produce a movie. It can produce. There was one. It was a comedy. Actually, it was done as a comedy with Trump and Biden and all this stuff. It was just, I don't know. I just stumbled across it. But anyway, but AI made it really look real. Like, golly, these guys are really acting this out. It's not. They're not. AI is really. I think it's really dangerous. But and I think it could very well fit right into the whole end times theology. I'm more concerned about, America, where we are with our relationship with Israel, and they're always talking about the peace treaty with Israel and all that other stuff. And at the beginning of the tribulation, Israel goes into a 7-year peace treaty, and if this whole concept about the peace treaty that's potentially going on, talking about a peace treaty and, the bringing in all the Arab nations and all that stuff, I'm more concerned about that. I think that says something more to me than AI right now. I think AI is definitely a tool that will be used, but I think of the different nations. Some of them are going to come in and they're going to support Israel. Some of them aren't. Most of them aren't. But I think that has a lot to do with where we are theologically and eschatologically right now. And we'll see. I have a sense of excitement about the future, but then again, I have a sense of, dread, because when I walk through a crowd, walk down the street, and I just think about all the people that don't know the Lord, they're not going to know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen. And I think about that with my own kids, and I'm sure you do as well. It's a deep in my heart and my mind to concern myself about that. I'm actually considering, I was with my friend who was just visiting with us. He's been mentoring men for his whole entire life. He's a solid, very knowledgeable believer. And he told me probably 20 years ago, he says, you need to start discipling some men. And it's been one of those things that's been on my mind every time that words that he told me kind of haunt me. It's kind of like that scene in Vietnam, kind of that way. It just haunts me And so I decided I'm going to start pursuing that. I think I'm going to try and see if I can get together just a guy's Bible study.
That's really interesting. That there's a movie that you told me about that actually shows that there's an example of that.
It was a wonderful movie.
I forgot the name of the movie.
Purge.
The Purge.
A wonderful movie. I think I'm pretty critical of Christian-based movies because most of them are off. They're just off. And I mean, even The Chosen. The Chosen, in my opinion, is way off. But The Purge, I got to say, I saw The Purge and I thought, that is a perfect movie. I mean, everything about it is wonderful. Even in the outcome in the end was wonderful.
Yes.
Very well thought out, very well acted. The message is clear. And, and the main character in that was mentoring young men. Just, helping young men. Yeah, and the kid that was involved was a loser at that point. I mean, he had no future at all. But anyway.
I know through the movie, at the very beginning, some of the beginning scenes shows kind of how he was.
Yeah.
And then towards the end, it's like such a huge difference.
Huge difference.
But that's what the outcome can be when there are the right people in your life and helping you guide and open your eyes to things that you're not even seeing. And I think right now we're at a time where that is so necessary, because young teenagers, they get raised and influenced by the stuff that they see on the screens.
YouTube, not YouTube,
TikTok.
TikTok.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate, because that that is so powerful.
Yeah.
And we're a lot of people don't even have a father figure.
Yeah.
And if they do, if there's a father, sometimes they're just way too busy and they're not really involved. They come home, everyone's on their own gadget.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Go to a restaurant where there's a family sitting at a table, and all of them are on their cell phones. I see it all the time, where the kids are all plugged in and the parents are both plugged in. Everybody, there's no talking. They're just all on their cell phones.
Do you think there's a possibility of that to change, like to the pendulum to swing the other way?
Well, my wife and I will occasionally, when we go to a restaurant, sometimes we're both on our phone, but then I think, I don't want to do this. I put the phone down, and she puts her phone down, and we don't get on our phone. Because it's so easy. So-and-so's texting me, oh, I'll answer the text, all that. I get, because I manage a property in Forestville, I'm kind of like a 24-hour kind of guy. I have to be available to answer questions or to guide my manager, that kind of thing. So I get calls at 10 o'clock at night sometimes. But I just tell Cheryl, I say, I have to answer this, because, I'm responsible for a lot here, and, that type of thing. But that's a rare situation. I really think our cell phones we're dominated by them. I mean, they're so much a part of everybody's life right now. Can you imagine? And when I was in the payphone business, we were putting up payphones everywhere. We had over 1,000 payphones. And anyway, and I remember one of my partners in that said, in the early 90s, he says, well, we don't see the cell phone taking off very much for a long time, for another 7 or 8 years. And I can remember that quote to this day. And I'm thinking, was he ever wrong? That cell phone hit, and suddenly it just exploded. And we were all carrying our own cell phones. And we were fortunate. We got out of the payphone business just in time, like months before it crashed. And but anyway, the cell phone is it can be a real asset. And then again, it could really be a liability as well. I mean, I have, my cell phone is like my computer. I mean, I have so much in it. I do a lot of business just on my cell phone.
I also wonder, like, what does it do to, like, the brain and us as humans, long term, constantly processing information, seeing different things. I don't know. There was the statistic that I can't remember exactly, but what it is. But it's the amount of information that people are processing right now compared to what it was 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Huge difference.
We were using fax machines back then. You don't even know what a fax machine is.
Actually, I do. When my dad started the flooring business,
yeah,
he used to get fax, like an order, like a job,
yeah,
a copy. So the guy who was giving him jobs, he would send in a fax. So I had to kind of help my dad out with that technology. So I know a little bit.
When I started out in the insurance business, everything was in triplicate. Carbon.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, copy machines were just kind of coming out, and we were doing everything in triplicate. So you had to press really hard because we had 3 copies to go through. I mean, and then suddenly the fax machine came out, and we thought, wow, that's a pretty neat deal. And it was dot matrix, and it was, it was just. Been fortunate to go through quite a time. From I was born in '50, and a lot has happened since 1950. I mean, technologically, it's a different world today. But yeah, I can remember when we didn't have cell phones. When I needed to call somebody, I'd stop and use a payphone
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that was my life for a long, long time. I didn't have Google Maps. I had the map. Okay. I got to go somewhere. I got the map in front of me and I'm going to go and drive there, and I'm driving looking at the map, that type of thing. We
I
live in a
remember
different
those.
world today.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, life is so much easier today. It's just
It's much easier, but it's also complicated
in different ways.
in different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so much easier to get around. It's so much easier to communicate. I mean, it just is. It's just easier.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't think the kids nowadays, a lot of them don't know how to write cursive. They they just know how to type,
Yeah.
but they know how to code.
True.
And I don't know how to code. So I guess coding is the new cursive.
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
that's what it is. And, I never got involved too much in video games. I think that video games are just a huge waste of time. I mean, like, huge. And not that you can't play them. I mean, playing them is fun maybe for a while, but they dominate people's lives today. So some people who literally just, that's all they want to do is play video games. What a time waster that is. We all have the same, a minute is the same for me as it is for you. How we use that minute, will determine a lot of things down the road. And wasting your time on.
That is the one thing that I'm trying to communicate this with my son right now and try to explain to him how important it is to start tracking like where your time goes. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to tell me this, because there was a lot of things that we could not do in our home that other boys did. We couldn't go to certain places and all that.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, and my dad, he always told me this. He said that you might think that it's not a big deal, or maybe I should let you do this or go here. But he said that your life right now is, you're laying the foundation for your next, for what you're about to build in your life.
Absolutely.
Because I understood foundation. We were always in construction, right? So my dad, he said, like, whatever you do right now, how you spend your time, that's your foundation. If it's all going to be all these little, these bad decisions that you're going to make, it's not going to be a solid foundation. And then once you start putting everything on top of it, it's going to crumble. It's going to fall apart. And so that's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to also have my son understand that as well. And he's getting it.
Raising kids, one of the things also with kids, with anybody really, is choosing your friends correctly.
Yes.
Making sure that you choose your friends carefully, because it's very likely you're going to end up just like them, because you're going to hang out together, you're going to do things together. Critical to pick good friends. I always told my kids that. I said, make sure you choose your friends carefully. You have good friends, not just, and that doesn't, and when I say friends, I'm not talking about somebody you just met, and suddenly, you're getting along with them. That's not a friend yet. That's an acquaintance. A friend is somebody who'll stand by you when things are tough. A friend is somebody who will be there for you if you're in need. That's a true friend. And for you and your kids, as a father, you'd die for your kids. I know you would. I would. That's pretty close. So choosing your friends, I think for these young people nowadays, choosing your friends is really critical, because there's some people out there that maybe you don't want your kids to be associated with.
That's so interesting that you're saying this, because just a few days ago, I was reflecting back on a period of my life when I was younger, and up to the point where I reconnected with certain person, I was still a teenager. I was on a very good track.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that person kind of rolled back into my life and we started hanging out, and that guy was already kind of influenced by where he was living. He was living not in a great area, and he had other boys influence him, his friends. So then I started seeing like, oh, wait a minute, that's okay. Oh, and that's okay. So if
That's what
if this
happens.
guy, he's also from a Christian family,
Yeah.
that's okay for him. Then maybe it's okay for me too.
Friendship, picking friends, picking the right friends, that are not going to bring you. You want friends that will lift you up, not friends that will take you down.
Yes.
And that's critical. And teaching your kids that find friends that want you to be better than you are. It's like your wife. You want your wife to encourage you to be better than you are, and you her. That's a building relationship. You don't want friends that take you down or tease you and harass you and give you a hard time. You want friends that will lift you up, and you build them up as well. It's a mutual thing.
Yeah.
And I had going through high school, I really had just two main guys that I was friends with. We went to different high schools, but we went to the same church.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to keep each other kind of on track. And that was critical. I think that I know some people in my high school that went the wrong way, and I could have very easily been closer friends to them. But having a Christ-centered life, choosing friends with that perspective is critical.
Yeah.
And it really, it'll come back to you later on, and as you grow up, and you'll realize the value of that. I know it was critical for me, kept me out of trouble. But I grew up in a household just like yours. I couldn't go to dances because, we didn't believe in dancing,
Yeah.
That was horrible, right? I couldn't do a lot of things that my friends were able to do. I graduated high school, and I didn't go to the prom.
Oh.
But my senior year, I worked full time.
Yeah.
So I was the richest kid in school, but I didn't go to the prom, right? That was kind of the way that went.
Yeah.
So it's just, anyway. But I had good friends.
Yeah.
And I value that to this day. They're still very good. Well, one of them just passed away, actually. But the other one I just spent time with him, and he's solid. And that's what I was telling my wife, is that, because I've been married now to Cheryl for 7 years. And every time she meets, I tell her, I say, you'll find my friends are all really good, high-quality people, because I choose that in my life to really associate with great people that help me to be a better person. They call me to be a better person. Not that I don't look at it like social or, you know what I mean? It's not a class thing. It's I want to be a better person.
Yes.
And so these friends call me out. It's like we call each other out. If we have, if we see something that needs to be talked about, that's what true friends are for. You talk to each other. You bring up things that maybe if I saw you going down the wrong road, I'd pull you aside and say, hey, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's what true friends do.
True. Yeah.
And that's what we're called to do as a Christian as well.
Yeah, I agree with
Spiritually, that's what we're called to do.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed this conversation. If there's anything else that you want to say, mention, and if not, I just want to sincerely thank you for coming on.
Well, I want you to know my engine is back.
Good.
And I'll be flying in about 3 weeks.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Congratulations.
Just wanted you to know that.
That's cool.
Expect a phone call.
Well, awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
It's fun to do.
If you like this video, here's another one for you to watch. If you don't want to miss the next video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button.